Tabs opened.
Hello there and welcome to the next edition of Let's Talk Trackmania. This is, of course, our new weekly episode of which we are coming out with you today. And we've got a few more topics of Trackmania to be talking to you about. We are joined currently, myself, of course, Paul Scotty Gillies. I'm your host of this esteemed talk show, and I am joined by an equally as beautiful member of our side cast, as we would say, but not to say that anyone is not worth as much. But we do have Mr. Ludwig, we have Mr. Turbo, we do also have EirikHoldal, who will be joining us in a few minutes. He is unfortunately running late, but thank you very much for joining me once again, Mr. Ludwig. It is, of course, always my pleasure to have you alongside me as in life as well. But how are you doing today, man?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm doing very, very good. Despite I forgot ending my stream and changing the title. Because 1 hour ago I was streaming and I forgot to go offline. And then I was in my intermission scene and everyone could see me, but all good. But yeah, I'm fine. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing perfectly well. Another week, another Let's Talk Trackmania episode we've got for you guys today. I always love talking to people. I mean, you know that, Turbo. You know I can talk for days. I love having a little bit of a platform to, address what kind of put our finger on the pulse of Trackmania and talk about it a little bit. That's what I enjoy doing. And you know me, I love talking shit anyway. So now I've got my own show. I can do whatever I want. But anyway, before we kind of get a bit too far ahead of ourselves, again, we do have a new episode. We do have a new group of topics for you today. To give you guys who are watching a bit of an overview of what the kind of main topics we plan to cover on this episode, Trackmania Grand League, what we know of it so far, what we can expect, what we've seen so far, of course, the ESA, the most recent Speedrunners Assembly, which took place, I believe, a week ago, possibly last weekend, correct me if I'm wrong, and also just mapping in general, and how our kind of overview of mapping is, and how we kind of feel about the various things that affect mapping. But while we're waiting for Mr. Holdal, and while I mentioned Trackmania Grand League first, I think it's, as it's one of the most kind of esteemed competitions, I think it's only fair that we bring that up first. It's probably going to be one of our biggest topics that we'll, of course, be able to bring Eirik in. And it is a topic that develops over time. I mean, Turbo, we've spoken about this previously in previous episodes. I mean, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think was the last time we addressed Trackmania Grand League. We've, of course, seen the map reveals. We've had the champions confirmed for us. We've seen a show match coming out and things like that. How are you feeling now about Trackmania Grand League in comparison to a few weeks ago?
I mean, in the show match, it felt a bit like the old game because we had the remakes of all the maps. And now we actually have the maps. And, I mean, you think, it is summer. It is not starting anyone soon, but then you think about it, it's only 1 month till the season will start, and people actually starting to practice the maps. I think the map look nice at the first glimpse, but some things are actually pretty hard. But how I feel about this is actually that I'm hyped for it to see how people will perform, and also how the before mentioned in the podcast 3 new people in particular will perform on those maps, because I think some things are a little bit easy, but I'm very interested to see who can perform on ice the best.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think ice is going to be a really big factor in this new Trackmania Grand League season? Do you imagine it's going to be making up quite a large chunk of the maps we're going to see, and as such having a big effect on the outcome at all?
You mean ice or?
Ice, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think so, actually, because there are, I think, on almost every map, I think, except 2 or 3 maps, we have ice on. And, I mean, if you have played ice already, you know that you need a good exit and also, a good angle after that. So it will be pretty hard, and this is something that players have to, they have to get used to that. And also, we've seen some full stop if you go from the ice, from the normal ice, a little bit more to the right and crash a tree, you have to respawn, or you have to go out there with 20 kilometers per hour, and you lose a tremendous amount of time. But this can eventually happen for every player.
Yeah, ice, as we have noticed, is quite unforgiving. I'd certainly agree with you in that. Not only in terms of mistakes, but It reminds me a little bit about full speed. So if you make a kind of crucial mistake in full speed, and we don't mean that just by crashing, of course, but say you miscalculate a speed slide, so you enter a tube wrong or something like that, then you see it costs you in your speed initially, but with full speed being as much about gaining speed throughout the map, I feel ice is also about getting speed and maintaining, or kind of building, as a kind of taking, I mean, I suppose it kind of fits, being a bit of a snowball effect on ice, where it just keeps rolling and getting faster and faster. So gaining momentum and transferring it through the rest of the ice section. Now, at least through the identities, we haven't seen that many long ice sections where you would see, speed needing to be maintained and things like that. I mean, I suppose it's one of the things, like, when something's new in Trackmania, you tend to be seeing it everywhere. But, I mean, do you expect any of the players in the TMGL to have any trouble adapting to the new surface? I mean, we've seen some of them streaming, playing the campaign, playing all these different maps. Do you imagine there's any that's going to thrive, or any that are going to kind of fall a little bit behind with ice?
I think I see where you want to go through. I think actually Kappa can really struggle. Not take any shots. But I mean, if you like learning, he's learning Pet right now. So for anyone who doesn't know, but I think it will be pretty hard for him to like get used to it. He really struggled with neo sliding and just get everything used to it. And we know, guys, that it is faster playing with Pat on ice. But other than that, I mean, Riolo's practice looked pretty good, as well as Spam's. I just lurked a little bit there, but I'm just hyped for the first step, and I think then we can talk. I won't make any guess or bets, because in the end, in season 1, everyone thought, Marchand is performing bad, but then he all of a sudden, I mean, he wasn't that consistent, but all of a sudden he played very, very well and had a battle in that top 3 on some maps. So we will see, and I'm also, like I've mentioned that beforehand, how Yannick's, Afi, and Gwen will perform against Pack, Scrappy, Cole Jr., etc.
I mean, we've had the kind of chance to digest within the last few weeks, of course, most recently the maps coming out, the players being confirmed and all the rest of that. And we've had a chance to kind of digest how we feel about Trackmania Grand League coming up to the tournament itself, which will be taking place soon, of course. And it will be over a 6-step format as it was previously. Much the same, with some minor differences in terms of how many maps you may lose points on, how many maps are going to be carried forward into each week and things like that. But now that we've had the chance to have the maps out, we've seen the players training on them, as you've mentioned, you've checked in the likes of Violu. I mean, has your kind of outlook changed in any way as to who would be your favourites, or who you would be looking to struggle as a result of things like ice, or just as a result of your overall impression of the maps, maybe favouring a specific kind of player?
I think it is a bit reset towards the other step, because on the other step we had Carl Jr. will definitely battle it out here for the top spots. But I think we have so many new elements, and the game actually feels new as well. It feels so squared with all the new blocks and everything. I mean, I tried to go on the mapping yesterday as well, but we come to that topic later. But the game just feels a little bit different, like to drive. Maybe you guys had that feeling as well. It's not like that round. It is more like a squared shape. And I mean, of course, you have higher expectations to a player. Hello, Eirik. That is streaming, and you can see what he's doing. But on the other hand, players who are not streaming have also a chance of doing very great. So I will just leave it like that. What is actually your opinion about that, Paul?
Well, one of the main things I've been thinking about, which I believe could change up a little bit of things coming into the new season, is just simply, you know what it's like. I mean, you've had the feeling, we've spoken about it previously, when the new games came out and you feel the kind of urge to play it. It's new, it's fresh, you want to get involved in it. And because this new season's coming so close to that, we're seeing some players who historically have not had as much motivation to train so heavily for events. My prime example would be Massa. We're seeing players like that getting caught up in the wave in the hype wave, so to speak, and are putting a lot more hours into Trackmania than they would normally, even for a tournament of this scale. So I think it's going to be very interesting, considering a lot of these people are streaming a lot more, as it's a lot more profitable for them at the moment. It's a lot more engaging. They've got more people coming, got more people subscribing and such. So we're seeing a lot more streamers put more hours into the game. And for your players like, say, Bren and Massa, who were struggling a lot in some tournaments as a result of not being able to put as much time or not being willing to put as much time in. I mean, with these sort of players, we know what they're capable of from other tournaments. Of course, Bren being one of the star performers in the beta season, if I remember it correctly, and Massa being one of the top names in tech, at least through the years we're talking through 2014, 15, 16, 17, and so on. So, I mean, for these players to have that kind of boost of motivation going into the new game, having that fire to compete and fire to train, I think can really be making a big difference. But it really depends, because everyone's going to have that fire. You know, it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be able to take the biggest advantage out of the new game feel, so to speak. I mean, I think everyone will be putting in a similar level of hours, but I think the newer players, the likes of, well, I say the newer, as the younger players, might have a little bit of an upper hand in terms of how they're able to adjust to the new dynamics that you were talking about and things like that. But we do also have Mr. Holdal here for us. Are you all good to go, Mr. Holdal?
Yeah, if you can hear me, if is my mic correct?
Can you hear it? Hello?
Yeah, we're all good.
No, I'm kidding.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're all good. We're all good. He's here.
Yeah, I'm good.
The dynamic trio is once again united. We were just going over a kind of brief discussion about our kind of feeling of Trackmania Grand League up until this point. We're talking about how it's kind of changed, how, if any, our feelings have changed in the past few weeks or anything like that. But not to kind of drag you up into points that we've already addressed, I think it would be best if we kind of discuss another part of Trackmania Grand League, which was one of the main points we were wanting to go into with this, which was the maps that have came out for Trackmania Grand League. I believe all 6 have been released at this point. At least for the starting steps, of course. And I mean, we've seen a lot of the streamers playing it, both part of Trackmania Grand League and not part of Trackmania Grand League. And we've seen a lot of people, you know, we've seen a lot of people really enjoying the maps. We've seen people who've been having trouble with the maps, either that they are having trouble with them technically, or they're just simply not enjoying them, which is always the kind of split you see with competitive maps nowadays. But I mean, Turbo, I suppose you've been the one who's been more engaged in both the playing and watching sides of things, perhaps. What's your kind of first impression been of the Trackmania Grand League opening map pack, so to speak?
So, I mean, you have 6 fresh maps out of the oven, and every track has a length of over 1 minute. So obviously it is hard really learning the track. I personally, as a spectator, just when I saw the maps, I liked them. But when I played them for the first time, I mean, I only played 2 or 3 of them. They felt pretty hard, especially this tree jump. And then you also have this reactor boost where you have to turn 180 degree. And if you don't make it, like there are some really ridiculous things. And I think that those are the make it or break it parts. And I think that the maps are like fine, but people have to put so many hours into that to really get the consistency going, actually, on those tracks.
I would say definitely, yeah. I mean, with these kind of maps, consistency is the name of the game when it comes down to them. A point I was wanting to raise a little bit later on about the difficulty we'll, of course, get on to in a bit. But Eirik, of course, you're the kind of man who's been focusing a lot on, of course, other competitions with the Zerator Cup most recently. So what's your kind of, how much involved have you been able to get into the Trackmania Grand League side of things? Have you seen the maps yourself, or have you gotten any kind of feelings from any players or spectators as to how they're feeling about the upcoming map set?
I guess this is an answer I will give to all of the topics in Trackmania at the moment. I wish I had more time, because if I could pick, I would watch Trackmania 24 hours a day, but I sadly can't. But I actually have watched, I believe I watched Massa, I watched Kappa, Pack, Spam, and I think the majority of them is saying that they actually feel that these maps are somewhat lit, if you want to use that word. So I think the players that are supposed to play in the highest division and eventually battle it out for the title, they are positive to it. From what I've seen, I like them, but I haven't watched too much of it, so I cannot, if you say, ask me a name for a map, I cannot mention a name, because every time I go into a tournament in Trackmania, I don't really know the map's name, so I guess that is something I should be better at if we want to speak about the map in particular, but so far, I cannot say that I'm disappointed, and more towards the happy side when you just look at the first impression I have of the maps.
Mm-hmm. I mean, something I was kind of wanting to bring up there, I was just wanting to get your guys' first impression of this, first of all. But, of course, kind of two main things which have been talking points about this map set, which has just came out, of course, as I said, the 6 maps. I believe they were released 1 per day. It was 2 things. First of all, the kind of separation between community-focused maps. So I believe those maps made by Kiesla, Table, and I forgot the other mappers, but I'll try and remember them a bit later on. Other maps that were made by members of Nadeo. So I believe one was either made by Hillis, one was definitely made by Softy, and one by Tona. Link, thank you very much.
Link, yeah, true.
Thank you, never mind for reminding me.
Sidewave, I think.
Yeah, Firestorm as well. Thank you very much. My chat coming in strong as always, saving my ass. But, I mean, talking about the maps in general, at least from me as a spectator, I have at least noticed a difference between certainly the approach and the setting up of the map, so to speak, from people who are in the Deo camps. We're talking, Tona, Softy, and if Hillis is getting involved in mapping himself, of course, as well. And, I mean, me personally, less so Tona's maps. Tona's, of course, a very accomplished mapper. But I've noticed a difference in the kind of... It's hard to kind of quantify what I'm trying to say without sounding harsh, but some of the maps looked less inventive, or they just simply looked as if, the scenery was not as diverse as some of the other maps were making use of. I mean, I know UTurbo as being more, as said out of the two of you, being the person who's had more involvement in seeing the maps being driven, maybe even driving them yourself. Have you seen any, or if you were to look at 2 maps together, one kind of Nadeo map and one community map, shall we say, would you be able to notice the difference in the same way that I'm kind of saying I think I would?
I mean, I've not really put too many eyes on the scenery, I wanted to say, but I mean, it didn't really bother me too much as a player. For me, the routing is very important. But on the other hand, I mean, the maps were always a bit more boring styled. And I mean, I have maybe a theory for that. Maybe it looks like that because the stadium is bigger. I don't know, but we will see. And does this map really need scenery, you think? What do you guys think? Does this competitive type of map need scenery or not?
But Scotty, did you think about the scenery, or did you just think about the map in general, like how it feels to drive?
Both. Okay, map and scenery. Okay, so let's go into scenery and then into the map after that.
I don't give a shit about scenery.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, it's just as long as the race is somewhat close, and as long as this identity part that they want to give or add to the map because they want to give a show to the viewers, as long as that is not too random, even though nothing is random in Trackmania, then I'm fine with it. I want close battles, and that is maybe hard to do on maps that is going to be driven in 6 laps. We saw that yesterday for PKR. Once players are not fully no-life, then you just send them into a 6 map or 6 lap on a map. That might be hard, and you see you can be 14 seconds in front of second place, and that's not really fun to watch, really. So as long as the maps are somewhat competitive and not too hard, I'm happy with it. But I guess we only get that answer once the players actually play against each other.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I mean, the way I would kind of look at the scenery kind of argument, you don't need scenery to have a good competitive map, in my opinion. It's secondary to having a good map as far as I come from. But that's me speaking as a competitive player, Well, Nadeo has long spoken of their goal as being kind of how the game looks, how the game would look to a new viewer and things like that. And one of the most important points about the new game scenery has been, I would point to the track of the day. Now, we see, I don't know how much you guys have played about the track of the day,
but everyone.
Yeah, but one of the main things that people have said about Track of the Day, at least from the competitive side of things, is they are good maps, but they're primarily more focused on scenery rather than the route, the feel, the flow of the map. However, one thing I would say about the scenery efforts is some of them are outstanding compared to what I'm normally used to in Trackmania. We've seen some maps that are kind of Micro Machines rendition of a full house and outdoors areas. We've seen maps that are like I kind of seen in Inception, where they're kind of on two different axes almost, kind of horizontal and vertical. It shows the capability that's in the new game, right? So for its flagship tournament, I think you should be pulling out all the stops to make sure your maps look as interesting as possible, because your competitive players will see through it no matter whether you've got the best scenery in the world or you've got no scenery whatsoever. Your competitive players will see right through it anyway. They're going to be focusing more on the game itself.
Yeah.
Kind of people, the scenery effect will wear off after a few runs. That's just the way we are. At least that's the way I am. I'll speak for myself in that regard. However, for your new player playing the game for the first time, the second time, maybe they haven't played the game yet. Maybe this is their kind of first exposure. They're going to be the people having that wow factor. These are the people that are sending clips of like the fucking press forward tracks to each other because it looks amazing.
When my girlfriend says she's alone at home or something like that.
yeah. But I mean, these are very, very visually impressive, right? So when you see maps that have very little kind of scenery, well, I'd not say effort, but not a lot of scenery focus put into it, then it does kind of leave me a bit wondering what kind of effect this would have on the new viewership that they're trying to draw if you have very visually impressive maps. I mean, do you if you kind of put yourself on the outside, would you say that if you're watching a tournament for the first time that you would even care about something like that? I mean, I don't even know if you guys are able to kind of put yourself on the outside, but Eirik, because you're less of the player out of the rest of us, so to speak, because you're the closest, I would say, to the outside in terms of a player perspective. I mean, would that kind of change the way you would think about scenery at all?
No, but as you said, I think it's maybe hard for us, even though I don't play it. I think I watch too much Trackmania to give a valid opinion of it. But honestly, if someone tune into Trackmania just because they want to watch its scenery and that is what they think about, let's say if a map has good scenery and bad competitions compared to, let's say, good competitions and bad scenery, and if they pick the good scenery part, then I don't want to associate with those kind of people, because I don't care. I care about the players. I don't care about if there's pink trees or blue trees or green trees. So as long as the maps are built for competitions and as long as there are possible to have close races, and then I think that is easier to gain interest from viewers. I don't think somebody is going to share, let's say if a casual viewer in esports joins Trackmania, I think he would likely share a close match instead of share something that he said, okay, look at this race. It had a lot of cool blocks around the track. So I think competitions is the most important factor for casuals and for the hardcores.
Mm-hmm. Just to kind of be clear on the point I was kind of trying to bring forward, I would never suggest, especially as a competitive player, never suggest to kind of sacrifice the competitive nature of a map for scenery. More that it's kind of way I would look at, say you're browsing a game you've never seen played on Twitch. People would be more likely to go for a stream that seems very visually impressive. It's got cool effects that appeal to them and things like that. It's the same when you're talking about branding. People normally go for the fancy looking, I don't know, can of cola in comparison to, a store zone where it's just a blank label kind of thing. I think it's just, it's not essential, but I think it's another reason you could give someone to tune into this. Another plus factor to add to TMGL instead of having it be insignificant, have it being a non-factor. That's the way I look at it at the very least.
Yeah, but can I ask something? Like, okay, let's say that we have a perfect match, and then of course we can add scenery as a part of then making it better. But You guys play maps, isn't it? Like once you add too much scenery, like I heard some players complain if there's a lot of pink trees, then you lag. So if you add a lot of scenery, that can also impact how it feels to drive. Maybe it looks cool to drive, but the feeling of driving is not as good. Is that something that is valid, or?
It is valid.
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely something valid. But in a game of this kind of this game, if we're honest, is not very technologically demanding. It's not a game which is, requiring top of the line graphics cards and things like that. Whereas you do have people who do have great hardware who struggle for, good FPS in this game. It's not very well optimized. That's the problem with Trackmania. We could have very visually impressive maps if there's some way which we'll be able to have tools which will be able to make them less demanding on the game. I mean, we've seen maps that are 4.5 hours long that have been made, namely by Dodeca is the one I'm making you the example of. 4.5 hours long, which is as full to the brim of just track as you could possibly imagine in Trackmania 2, yet you can still run it, reasonably stable. You've got beautifully made RPG maps in Trackmania 2 Stadium, which are made at a minimal kind of impact to the performance of the game. And I feel especially nowadays when technology has kind of moved along so far that really this shouldn't be an issue we'd have to worry about. But whether that's a technical issue in terms of Trackmania or maybe it is just we are kind of expecting a little bit too much after seeing, some of the kind of possibilities from the track of the day. But I've kind of had a bit of a back and forth with Eirik in terms of that, Turbo. What's your kind of thoughts on the scenery argument, so to speak?
Yeah. So I had this on the Zerator Cup 07 map, on the Sakura map, where you had to cut in between those two like small things, and you had to do that jump. So I had really major lag issues, and I had to really put my graphics down. And even then, I had some lag spikes. And I mean, I think it's a good comparison to compare the track of the day versus TMGL maps, because majorly the track of the day is focused on the scenery rather than on the routing. You're really getting overwhelmed by the scenery, and you're like, wow, what the hell is that? And the maps are just super beautiful. I can definitely agree with that. But the routing is definitely lacking in those. So we have shortcuts in them, like plenty of shortcuts. Then we also have like unsmooth turns and everything. And on the other hand, we have the TMGL maps, which are super smooth to drive with everything. But the scenery is a little bit lacking. But to go back to the point that Eirik has mentioned, I would never, ever pick scenery over routing, because I think a new player doesn't even know or doesn't really consider all the possibilities of scenery which can occur. So they don't just want to force on or like to focus on the car or the battle, whatever, and that's it. So I think this one is actually better to have routing over scenery in that case.
But it's not also an argument that essentially is the reason why Nadeo wants to move away from tech, because they felt like, okay, once it's tech, it's a lot of turns, and maybe normally in a tech turn you go under maybe a turn you've driven before or jump over some parts, and it was not necessarily clear where you were supposed to drive. So maybe scenery makes it more confusing for a new viewer to see, okay, where is the next turn? What should I look after in 2 seconds instead of, oh, there was a turn, and there was a turn, there was a turn. I don't know if I agree with that, but I mean, that's the reason why they said they move away from tech, to make it easier for viewers to understand, because in tech you need to know the track before actually tuning in to understand it. But I don't know.
For sure. Well, I think we're kind of all united in the idea that routing is, of course, more important than scenery in that regard. But also, I think I would at least assume you guys agree with me that at least, well, it does have technological problems. It would be nice. That's the way I look at it. As long as it suits all parties, as long as it suits the players are able to play, no problem. It's just another kind of plus we can add to the arsenal, so to speak. Now, in terms of the TMGL maps overall, of course, as we've as we've repeated previously, you do have 6 maps which will be going in, and they will be replaced throughout the season. I believe 2 new maps come in per week. It was previously 3, if I remember correctly. However, they've tried to bring the amount of maps down in order to combat I believe the reasoning they gave was kind of player health and fatigue. If that was if I'm correct in saying that, mentioning players such as Matt having medical issues as a result of Trackmania, or I suppose at least he said Trackmania at the very least, notably his wrist and his hands, if I remember correctly. But I mean, I'm always stuck kind of feeling about that I don't really think it will make a difference to myself. But I mean, you guys know about that as well. Turbo, what's your kind of thoughts on the change to 2 extra maps per week in place of 3, and also the reasoning behind that?
I mean, then we definitely have a map that is more valuable because, I mean, you can lose points on 3 maps, right? Still, or on 2.
I believe it will be on 2 now, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So on the 2 maps that will be the oldest or the newest.
I think oldest. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't know, but I mean, you can lose your points on 2 maps. I mean, then you only have to learn only quote unquote 2 maps in this period of time. This means that we have also less maps to, like, in general. I mean, yeah, of course, the players have to practice less when there's only 2 instead of 3 maps. But I mean, you still have to, like, maintain your level on the other maps. So I'm not really sure if this will foster the like medical standpoint from the players, or like the health from the players.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Eirik?
In theory, it works great. Like, okay, let's give them 2 maps instead of 3 maps. In what did I say? In theory, yeah, in theory, it works great. But I think in practical, I think if a player has time to play, he will play. I think if you give him 6 maps or 8 maps, as long as they have time to play Trackmania and as long as they have motivation, I think that is more important than how many maps do they have to play. I don't think too many players actually felt last season, at least during the group stage, that they were overtrained. I think more people actually felt that they were undertrained simply because they didn't maybe have enough time, like Pack and Bren maybe being the 2 best examples. Maybe those would benefit from this, that people that doesn't have time like Pack. But if you have time, I think they will play. I think Matt will play equally as much as he did. I asked him on the interview I had, like, do you think this is going to be a problem moving forward? He said yes. And I asked, do you think that this is something that you can somewhat keep yourself back from? Let's say that, okay, you know that you have Trackmania Grand League in the future, you should probably take a break, but there's also a new game, there's probably going to be hype. Are you going to be able to keep yourself back from playing? He said, I want to say yes, but I'm going to say no. So, I mean, I think it's like I said in the first sentence, and maybe I should stop after that sentence. In theory, it works great, but practically, I think it's not going to change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, what affects the amount of time you put into a map is what you want from it. You know, if you're a player, if you want to get a top level performance, you're going to need to put in a top level of hours. Doesn't matter whether, because the thing is, right? So with us having a 6 map pool throughout the week, that means you're going to have to invest the time to learn those maps and to get to a top level on these maps. Now, if you, I mean, any kind of competitive players experienced it. If you get to a good level on a map and then you don't play it for a week, because typically maps are in cycle for more than a week. So you don't play it for a week, you're not going to be as good in that map as you have been previously. So essentially, you're going to be investing a large but stable amount of time week on week, no matter how many maps are going to be coming in and going out. Unless we're talking 1 new map a week, then primarily you're going to be spending your time touching up your skills on the previous maps, which does not take as long. But again, if you're wanting a top level performance, you need to stay razor sharp on all of the previous maps, which takes time. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's not something that you can just, plow 10 hours a map in when they first come out and expect to just run 10 minutes on each of them and expect to then get the same results as when you put your first 10 hours in. That's not how Trackmania works. I mean, the feeling's one thing, but it's about keeping your rhythm. It's about having that kind of muscle memory from remembering everything on the map and things like that. I mean, I certainly don't have that kind of steel trap memory, so to speak. So, I mean, it's not really something I think is going to make a bit of a difference. To me, if they really kind of cared about, the players having issues with their health, then they wouldn't be having a tournament with 6 maps a week, you know? Like, they wouldn't have a tournament where you need to train and play 6 maps a week. They would not have steps lasting over an hour, you know? Like, with the steps, it was 6 by 6 laps, if I remember correctly. It was 6 laps for each map.
Was,
so you're talking, 10 minutes for each map. So you're going at least over an hour, including a little bit of breaks in between it. And it's not like rounds mode matches, or previous cup mode matches, where you would play for a minute, you would get maybe a 5-10 second rest, and then you'd play for a minute and you get a 5-10 second rest. For this, you're playing for essentially 10 minutes, then you get 30 seconds of rest, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. It is more grueling. I mean, it's you see that when you're watching people who are playing endurance races on your sim racing games. It can be more difficult for them. So I don't really think, well, maybe they do care about it, but this isn't really the right way to go about it. If they want to actually make a change, then they need to make a lot more kind of fundamental changes in terms of how they approach the tournament itself. You know, if they want to do anything for the players' health, as we have had, you know, people having issues with that. I've had issues with that. I've had to take some time off of the game as I've had issues with my wrists. So, I mean, it's definitely a factor, and it's not something to be ignored, especially in a game which utilises controller and keyboard a lot, which seems to be the kind of one of the key kind of points of the problem, so to speak, is how people use the controller and how people use the keyboard. But I mean, in terms of that, I mean, I don't think there's really much more kind of left to say in terms of, you know, like the health side of things. But what about you guys? I mean, in terms of just Trackmania in general, do you think, at least from what you've seen in the past few weeks, there's anything else really worth mentioning about it? Because it is a rolling story. It is something. It's not as if this is the only time we're going to be talking about it. I mean, it's something that, of course, we've got points being brought up, you know, seems every week about it.
So you mentioned Trackmania, but you mean Trackmania Grand League, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think simply because we only had the show match, basically, to do any conclusions about Trackmania Grand League in the moment, I think that I'm again going to go back to saying that Pack felt that he has something to prove this season. He is not happy with what he showed last season, and I'm curious to see how long that motivation is eventually going to stick around. Was it just for the show match because now we had time, now it was a new game, now maybe had a chance to play against one of his favorite streamers, so then he would actually play Trackmania because he's now streaming Trackmania. So I'm curious to see how long Pack is going to find this fun, how long it's going to keep motivation, because if he is motivated this season, then maybe he is going to be the biggest challenger to Carl Jr. I know I praised Gwen in the last, and I'm still going to do it. So, but I think maybe if you look at it realistically and not try to be somewhat ballsy with a player, I think maybe Pack should be the closest to Carl Jr. in terms of odds on the bets, but that it relies on how motivated he is, because we mentioned in last week that Gwen can be top, he can be zero. That is the case for Pack. The first beta season, second in the group stage. Once first season, he was not even in the playoffs. So Pack is the guy I'm the most curious about, and of course, then is Carl Jr. once again gonna show that he's the best player or not? So a couple of player stories to look forward to, but maybe not too much to mention at the moment. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. For sure, it's definitely something to keep our eyes on, at least through seeing them train and seeing them play and things like that, to see if we can get an insight into how much these people are putting effort into the game. So, as I say, it'll be a developing story, and of course, in the coming weeks, we'll be able to keep on to it. But I mean, in terms of other things that have been going on recently, it's at least been a hot topic for a few other people in terms of what they've been having on their lips, and also it was a kind of source of a good amount of viewership at the very least on Trackmania's Twitch over the weekend. Was I believe it's the European Speedrunner Assembly, ESA, hosted 3 Trackmania speedruns. I believe one was by Rasta Bobby in Trackmania 2, one was by Virtual on Trackmania Nations, if I remember correctly, and one was by Riolu on the new Trackmanias itself, hosting speedruns of all 3 games, with the exception of Trackmania Nations not having EO5 in it, I think, if I do remember correctly. But I mean, we at least us 3, Eirik, Turbo, and myself, have been at least in some sort of discussion about how we kind of feel about the kind of speedrunning scene in general. And I think it's quite divisive, but mostly depending on where you are in a game, whether how invested you are in a game. But I know you seem to feel pretty strongly about the speedrunning side of things in general, Eirik. I mean, would you care to give us your thought on, the speedrunning scene in general?
Sure. And I can just mention a point that I mentioned last week, that maybe in Trackmania we are really good at pointing out what we dislike instead of what we like. So I'm first going to say what I really like about this game, and that is that this is a good opportunity for new fans to come into the game. It's somewhat catered towards newer. You don't need to know Trackmania to enjoy this. Riolo explained pretty much everything you need to know about this, so it reached good numbers both on Twitch. It reached good numbers on YouTube. I'm curious to see if it's actually gonna be as popular as last year. Virtual had like 500k on the video that they uploaded from ESA. I think this year was lower in terms of viewers. I think it was like 6k. I might be wrong because I didn't watch it myself. But if I go into personally feel about it and why I didn't follow it live, it's simply because I don't feel that it's competitive fun to watch it. Because I mentioned this the last time, was G Geek was somewhat having a presentation about speedrunning. I was like, it feels like if the speedrun is more like who has the fastest PC rather than who is the fastest time. If you lose 1 second in loading time, you need to be horrendously fast to actually catch up in driving. So I know they have some sort of program where they only collect the fastest or only collect the driving time, but still it feels more like a showcase of the game towards new players, and I'm grateful for that, but it's not something I will be too invested in. And if I just bring up the point of, you mentioned 3 games, Trackmania 2 Canyon, Trackmania Nations Forever, and then Trackmania. I would like to maybe see only the new Trackmania and maybe showing what more the new Trackmania has, maybe some community-made tracks, because we mentioned what is great about Trackmania being like, you can create tracks, you can be so creative, but every time there is like a speed run or something, it needs to be some sort of official made map pack. I guess it comes down to the feeling of actually beating the game, but I think you could be so much more creative here. Maybe using all the Zeta Teacup maps, that would be fun. Seeing Gwen play all of them or Carl Jr. playing all of them. So you can... I'm not too a fan of showing like a game that is released in maybe... It was released in 2007, Trackmania Nations Forever, if I recall correctly.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then you show that sort of again and again, and once you show the campaign, you're not even showing all of it. So I don't know, but just want to make it clear, I'm mostly happy about it because it's gathered towards new fans and it can bring in new people, but it also can make it confusing. Let's say if you, today I'm going to watch speedruns, I'm going to watch Trackmania, and then you sit back with the feeling, okay, it was 3 Trackmania played. What Trackmania should I play? What is the best Trackmania to play? Because that is a point that is coming up in chat a lot. Like, what Trackmania is this? What Trackmania should I play? In my eyes, if you want to promote something, we should try as a community to promote the new game and try to get all of them into a new platform. But I don't know. I don't know if the speedrunning community is going to hate me. I don't know too much about it. But if you have any feedback about it, feel free to hit me up. I don't know too much about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think about it, Turbo, in terms of the speedrunning scene? Are you any more involved in it, or is it just kind of something you've kept hands-on but kind of admired it from a difference?
I loved Riolu's Trackmania Turbo speedrun because I can just relate to the game. And that's why I think if you play the campaign yourself and you maybe even know live the track and you know what's going on there, I think you have a better connection to it. And that's why, I'm not that interested into the new campaign, because I don't have this fact that I know live the map or something like that. So, I mean, it has a bit of a nostalgic fact for me in Trackmania Nations or something like that. But, I mean, it's getting a bit repetitive if you see this speedrun for the, I don't know, 3rd time now or whatever. I think it is a bit repetitive, but I mean, it is cool to see that Virtual can pull off those things. On EU2, I think he did the cut again, or I think it was that track, or he did some really good run where he was really going for. And as Eirik said already, I think it's a good promo for the game. and also the fact that it is representing our community with all the donations that have been popping there. I think we have got, or ESA have gotten like, I think 6,000 or 7,000 euro of donations over the period of Trackmania that has been played there. And yeah, I mean, it is just a good thing. And also for the streamer beforehand, it creates a bit of an hype that a streamer is preparing before that, like Virtual and Riolo did it beforehand. And what I also like is that it's showing the limit, that this game is pretty hard, that they, at the end of a speedrun, showing, yeah, you can do this map like this and this as well. And you see some ludicrous ways how you do it. But Eirik, I'm just asking the question, what would you do differently? I mean, you said like represent some community-made things, but how you like expect like seeing that speedrunning the Rato maps? Is this a thing somewhere? Because I only see like when I go on speedrun.org or whatever the site is, I only see like official campaign maps or anything like that.
Yeah, and that is the problem. I think that, I mean, sure, I guess it all comes down to the feeling of, yeah, you want to beat that game in ESA. I guess that translates to maybe Mario and etc. etc. But it would I think I posted this after the last speedrun of Riolo and Virtual on Twitter, that things you would like to see. I mentioned like I would love to see maybe Carl Jr. speedrun all of the ESWC maps he had played. Maybe speedrun all of the Serrato Cup maps. So you show that this game is not only about this campaign, because every time a new player comes into the game, it's like, what do they want to do first? It's the campaign. Okay. Then it's maybe great that to show them the campaign, but it will also be great to show people that Trackmania is more than this, because I think a lot of people struggle in this new game and struggle in the previous game to find out, what do I want to do after? What does this game has to offer besides the campaign? You saw XQC, Soda Pop, and Lyric, and all of them. They play the campaign maps, and once they somewhat tried to go into, let's say, casual maps, they find some Mario Kart maps. It didn't seem like they had too much fun of it, and since then they haven't played it. So maybe it would be a good way to promote something else. I don't know if the community can make like campaigns. I know Spam has made it in the past. I know other people has made it in the past. So maybe go behind some sort of community-made map pack and maybe just have it in the new game, because if I could pick, I would have everything that is promoted in the new game. But I don't know. I know the community is divided. I know Trackmania Nations Forever has a community. I know the Canyon scene has a community. So I guess they're really happy about it. But if I'm going to be selfish and just think about what I like in this game, and that is activity in the new game. So yeah, it's something to try out. I'm not. Maybe I sit there recapping after Gwen has done all of the 17 maps and failed all of the maps. I'm going to be like, whose idea was this?
One kind of idea I've got in terms of speedrunning and how I think it could kind of unite some of the arguments I was making earlier in Trackmania Grand League, and how I feel that you can kind of consolidate your viewers into the new Trackmania. However, have a speedrun which changes each year and is, very appealing to a new viewer. And also, I suppose, I mean, you could maybe look at it to a viewer who's already kind of, done the rounds in Trackmania, so to speak. I know it'd be a long one, but you could have something like speedrunning, say, the first half of the Track of the Days for a year or something like that. So that would be, shall we say, maps are about between 30 seconds to a minute and a half long. So shall we say about 150-ish maps, 150 to 200 maps. And you're talking, a speedrun which would take you a good, a few hours. However, which way you want to split that up. I mean, say you'd have two people doing the first half and two people doing the second half. I don't know how the other speedrunning shit works, but the way I look at it, Track of the Days are, they are comparable. Well, some of them are comparable to Nadeo maps and how they play. They're not very technical. The routing is not the primary kind of goal here. But what I was talking about earlier in the Trackmania Grand League, the scenery argument is that they're normally quite visually impressive. And if you're going for a speedrun of these, although of course you're going to be focusing on how the player's driving and things like that, having a score of very visually impressive maps, coming at you one after another, I can imagine that being very impressive for the kind of new viewer that the ESA attracts. I mean, we've seen plenty of people coming in from the ESA side of things. I mean, particularly Riolu and Virtual enjoying some extra audience members, through their involvement in ESA and such. So, I mean, that's just an idea. I don't really know if it would be better or if it'd be worse. It'd take a little bit more planning, as of course. I mean, what maps of the track of the day you would pick, because you can't do all of them. Otherwise, you're going to take up the whole show, I suppose. But I mean, the only problem with speedrunning, I don't think it really leaves us a lot to talk about, because as you were saying, Eirik, it's not competitive. It's just it's a little scene that people enjoy, because you don't really see any competition for the WRs in speedrunning either. I mean, you don't see the likes of, say Carl Jr. hunting, the TMNF speedrunning record, or I think you saw maybe for about 2 weeks people hunting the TM2 all flags record or something like that. But it's not something that's really stood the test of time, and I think maybe with a more of a scene behind it, it might, maybe in the lower end of things. But I don't think it's not something I focus on a lot. But I believe that's mostly the kind of difference between me being a player who's known all of these maps. I mean, these maps aren't particularly interesting to me. I've seen the cuts that have been posted on Twitter or anything like that. I've seen these all before, so it's a different experience for me than it would be for another kind of player looking at the ESA, for example. But definitely big props for them doing it. Big props to the Trackmania community. Showing our strength of community and reaching those kind of donation goals and such like that. So definitely very proud of our community in that respect. But I mean, the kind of, that's all I really had to say about the speedrunning side of things. We do also have a kind of one more kind of looming topic, which I believe we might either be strapped in for a short while or we might be here for another few hours. And that is just the kind of general subject of mapping. I mean, I did get a few questions about it already, but of course it's something we can kind of bring into our conversation we have about mapping. And how we mean by a topic about mapping is just simply mapping in general, how it's kind of developed over the course of time, how we feel about mappers themselves, how styles have evolved and things like that, and what kind of mapping in the new game looks like. But I mean, I find it unfair to start with anyone but the man who had map in his name, and that was the Norwegian map designer himself, Mr. Holdal. You've been a part of the Trackmania mapping scene before. You've had tournaments that have been played on your maps, almost exclusively, if I remember correctly, and he's gone. Anyway, but I'll kind of shift that to another side of things. So, is he back? Is he alive? Technical
never bring up Norwegian map designer, because then you break everything. I mean, he's dead.
Nature mystic drunk there.
Yeah.
Cuba Libre, hello.
But what was the last part of the question? I just heard you praising my nickname because that being the best nickname in Trackmania, so I agree. But what was the second part?
We didn't manage to get to the second part. I was just more saying, what has your kind of insight been on the mapping kind of thing? Although you've not mapped as much in the past, I believe, year or two, what was your kind of insight in the mapping scene when you were in it, and how do you kind of feel about it now?
Well, I started mapping once I realized that I'm not a good driver, because then I said, okay, maybe I'm good at something else in Trackmania. I built for maybe 2 years or so, built some short maps and hosted some competitions on them, somewhat popular. But the problem I had is simply that I'm not good enough driver to then eventually test the map. So I used way too long to be happy with the map to eventually say, okay, this is going to be something that pro players like. So eventually I said, fuck this, I'm not good at this either. I'll try to do some interviews. And at the moment, I think I'm decent at it, but probably sometimes I'm going to be like, fuck this, dude, let's do something else. Maybe I'm going to be like a canyon player or something. But I don't know. The thing I had in the past was, I as a map myself, I really like to look at competitive map packs on YouTube, like Games Assembly Tag, just to get inspirations from people. Because I think it's hard to do something just out of your own brain. I think no matter if you want to agree with it or not, I think you're going to be inspired by what the current scene is doing, what the competitions is promoting. And that is maybe something now that why you see so many mix maps, because now maybe TMGL is promoting it, and in the back of your head you want to try to copy it. Maybe you want to build a map for that, so eventually you just build a map that is promoted. So I guess that is also a part why tech players are sad about they are promoting mixed styles, because maybe then you miss a lot of good tech mappers. But yeah, I think the mapping scene, as being a mapper myself back in days, you spend so many hours on building something that was maybe highlighted for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then people forgot about it. And you had spent probably months on it, so many hours on it, and eventually forgotten about it, and then nobody cared after that. So I think it's the most underestimated part of the community, and I think it's about time that they get rewarded. I think they get rewarded in PKR, but I would like to see Team Gel also reward the mappers and maybe promote them, because that is a great part of the community that is really not highlighted as it should be. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of that kind of not necessarily a question, but point you would bring up, what, if any, solution would you offer to, kind of mappers to demand, or tournament organizers to provide? I mean, is it more recognition for their maps? Is it, monetary compensation for the time they're putting in? How would you kind of suggest that kind of works, so to speak?
Well, I think if you say that mappers should do this, or maybe mappers should go to a competition and say, hey, I want something back, then it's not going to work, because then the request and demand works here. Like, say that I built a really good map for Gamers Assembly. I know that it's top 5 maps, but I said to John and the people picking it that if you want to pick this map, you need to pay me 50 euros. Then it's going to say, okay, then we'll pick map number 6 instead of your map. So because there's always maps coming in, so it should be from the top down. Like the organizers should just see the value in what they provide. If there's a good map pack, it's going to be a good competition, and then the fans are going to like your event. If there's a shit maps, then the competition itself is going to be shit. I mean, it's the foundation of everything in the end. You can be as good at an event organizer as you want. You can start every match on time. You can have the best casters in the game. But if the maps are not good maps, if the player doesn't like to train the maps, if the viewers doesn't like to watch the maps, then your competition is not going to be viewed as a good competition. So if Nadeo wants to step, I think I stepped forward with it in man versus man. I paid, I don't know if it was 100 euros or 50 euros. It was something like a percentage of the prize pool just to highlight it. I tried to provide it to other organizers that eventually will host events, because I don't host events anymore. But I've not seen too much of it yet. And it should, because it's so easy to do something. It's so easy to host a competition and think that that work is free, because so many people will like to do it for free. And if they stop doing it, they stop doing what they like in Trackmania. So it's, I don't know, it should be something that Trackmania Grand League wants to do, just to be nice, just to show appreciation. It should be something PKR wants to do. I could say it's something Serrator wants to do, but he builds his maps himself. So, I mean, all competitions should appreciate it, and it's about time that they do, and hopefully they will if Trackmania becomes bigger and bigger, because, I mean, I'm a mapper myself. I'm always going to be. So, yeah, it's about time to show some respect to the mappers of this game.
Mm-hmm. What's your kind of 2 cents on that, Turbo? I know you've kind of dabbled in mapping for your own kind of tournaments and things like that, but what's your kind of perspective on the mapping side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mapping for my cup at the moment as well, and just in the new game now, I have the feeling that everything got a little bit harder with all the new blocks, all the new opportunities you have with the sand and everything. So I think actually that mapping is not acknowledged in the community, and as Eirik already said, it is the foundation for everything, and therefore we need mappers. And mostly, so I have the feeling that mostly we have the same mappers when it comes to competitive track. We always have those, let's say Firestorm, for example, for Team GL season 1. We had him building the identities and also adjusting some other things. But we need also some other people who can maybe get motivated, but maybe some want money for that, because I know that myself. You mapping for 4 hours and time flies by so fast when mapping. And I think building is a bit like cooking. I don't know. because it can be simple and people can enjoy it, but it can also be like super, super complex and can blow people's minds. I think that's a good comparison. But yeah, I mean, mapping, just getting into it, it's super hard. Also with a new game now, I think it is a very, very hard thing to do.
And just a disclaimer, because I said that maybe this is something Nadeo should do. I think the only mapper I spoke with is Superroll, and I think he said they are not getting rewarded. And now he said that after he built a map for the Trackmania show match, and that map wasn't eventually used, he was like, why should I even build for this map? So I think at the moment they say he's never going to build for them again because simply they didn't show him respect. But I don't know, like you brought up Firestorm or Storm, I don't know if he's getting paid for it, because in my eyes, he should be, because he built so many maps last season. So maybe it's wrong of me to assume that they are not getting rewarded with some sort, but I've not heard anything. And also a problem with Trackmania Grand League is maybe that it's not really, you don't feel like it's a public map request. Softy said that you can send in a map if you have a good map, but why not make like a request for it? I know he said personally that he doesn't have enough time, but I think a lot of community members would be happy to test out maps simply to make this competition better, and simply to have this feeling that mappers can contribute, and then if mappers can contribute, then you feel that the event itself is more community made. So some parts of the mapping side could be better in Trackmania Grand League and how the process is done, but I don't really know the insights of it, so I don't know if somebody from Nadeo is going to hit me up in DMs tonight and be mad about me, but if they do, I'm fine.
Yeah, I bet the issues you've had with that, but I mean, in terms of the mapping sides of things, if I can kind of have my input in that, I mean, I do agree with the kind of sentiment that you put, that mappers are kind of very underappreciated, and it seems to be that some of the most crucial jobs for people from the outside looking in to Trackmania, so that would be what contributes to what you see when you look at a tournament. So that's going to be mappers, otherwise you wouldn't have a track to play on. Casters, providing input to a tournament, streaming a tournament even in the first place, are I would say also there's quite a few roles, especially in some sort of other tournaments like the From Zero to Hero tournament, that kind of put a band-aid on the Gamers Assembly cancellation for just a few months ago. Tournament organisers, especially online, rarely ever get anything out of it, despite all the time they put into it. Mappers, I mean, with very, very few exceptions, often get absolutely nothing for all the work they put in, and that's even if they get their maps picked. Sometimes they don't get their maps picked, and then they're useless. It's just you can maybe release it a little bit later on, and it will be. It will be cool, but it won't get any recognition. The only ones I feel do end up actually getting valued and do end up getting any sort of compensation, be it advertising, be it monetary or anything like that, is things that are being used for advertising purposes. And that's things like skinners, that's things like movie makers and things like that. These are the people that are getting paid by the likes of Nadeo, by the likes of competition organisers, by sponsors, to bring things to the game. Mappers aren't being paid by anyone, Casters aren't being paid by anyone unless they're big casters. It's unless they're casters that are bringing numbers to the game over quality. That's the only time of which casters get paid by them. I mean, that was an issue that we'd spoken about previously, but I mean, I think, to be honest, it's something that's been so deeply rooted in Trackmania that it has just felt like, especially for casting and mapping, that if you don't do it, someone else will, or if you don't do it, no one will. And especially for the casting side of things, it doesn't really seem to be anyone's cared about that. I mean, they'll be as happy to let the match go uncasted before they'd, put anything towards a caster to do that. But while we're focusing on mapping, I mean, if I decide to take a stand, not that I map, of course, you don't even want to see what abominations have came out of my map editor, but I mean, if I don't map, someone else will do it. There's so many people who are invested in the mapping scene in Trackmania. It'd take a monumental stand to be made, and it mostly would only affect the smaller tournaments who don't have the capacity to give anything to the mappers anyway. So I do think it's kind of an impossible question, and I think it does take someone like Nadeo to really kind of set a shining example in that regard. Otherwise, mappers are going to just keep dealing with it in the same way they have done. Either continue to make maps and cope with, the kind of shitty whatever it is they get back, or they'll someone else will do it. I mean, we've seen a lot of experienced mappers drop out in the past. Some that are not interested in the Trackmania Grand League side of things have just moved on, and other mappers have took their place, and it's just as simple as that. So I do think it's kind of an impossible point to that, and it really is, as with most other roles in Trackmania, it's a bit of a thankless task.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, because sure, it's nice if they get rewarded, but you should never start your map editor hoping that you will get rewarded, because you should simply do it because you like it. Like Turbo said, it's going to take so many hours to actually do a good map. The longer you spend in the map editor, the more time you want to spend in it, because you're going to have so much fun that, let's say, after you build a map for, I don't know how long, let's say MD Point used to build a map, or Kiesla builds, let's say 4 hours just to be nice, and then they get 50 euros back, then you get 12 euros per hour. I mean, if that is the motivation for you, then that is high risk and low reward, because the money should just be more like a symbolic from the organizers that we actually care about you. We like the maps that you send in, instead of someone actually, at the moment in Trackmania at least, making some sort of career about it. Maybe in the future you can say that you're a professional mapper, like you build a map every week and you get 1,000 euros from it. I don't know, it's possible, but at the moment it's unlikely. But it's more like a gratitude. It's the same way when Nadeo wanted to sponsor my trip to Trackmania Grand League beta season. I could probably have paid it myself, but they wanted to pay me for it. I was happy, of course, by the money, but it was more like, oh, damn, Nadeo is actually caring about what I do in the game. And that motivation gave me, or that, that action gave me more motivation than the money. So I think that is also going to be the same for mappers. If Nadeo suddenly becomes like, open map request, the best map is going to get 50 euros, 100 euros. The mappers are being like, okay, Nadeo actually cares about it. If I put time and effort into it, if I get a good map, then I will not only get money from it, but I will also get recognition from it. They will probably promote it better. So yeah, it's all about that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, another point, well, at least one of the kind of only real points I had in the kind of mapping front, just to kind of ask you guys about this. We've seen the change in styles even in some tournaments, or even the styles in specific tournaments, having kind of profound effects on how Trackmania moves forward. Now, my prime example would be as, for example, the Zerator Cup. The Zerator Cup has always been, it's not been very well focused on the quality of the maps, just simply the entertainment factor the maps provided. And Nadeo been very vocal that with Trackmania Grand League, it has kind of changed their focus from the maps being over than being very, very focused on how they flow, how they are to play, and things like that. It's been more focused on showmanship, so to speak. Showmanship, you know what I mean? Showmanship, so to speak. So now that I've finally got that out of the way, so it's been kind of focused on that, and focused on how entertaining competitive maps can be. And we've seen that having an effect on, how even people were able to enjoy the Trackmania Grand League maps and the approach that they took in general. And that effect kind of came from what map style Zerator chose. I mean, I, along with quite a number of other people, believe, if Zerator made a massive tournament and it was, dirt, then you would have a massive, Nadeo run dirt tournament, or at least something that is then taking a bigger influence from dirt. And I feel, not to the same extent, I mean, that's a bit of a wild example, but I feel that the biggest tournament in Trackmania's mapping style has been influenced by a big tournament's mapping style in its own right, in terms of Zerator. I mean, how do you guys imagine the mapping style evolving? As we're, of course, quite new into the the kind of change to the mixed map style through Trackmania Grand League, through the beta season 1 and so on, instead of having, what was traditionally Tech World Championships, through having, Dirt Championships at Gamers Assembly or Canyon or so on. What do you guys imagine for the kind of mapping scene going forward? I mean, do you imagine that it's going to stay along with the kind of... I would kind of encapsulate Trackmania Grand League being a kind of mixed kind of gimmick style almost. What do you guys feel that will kind of evolve to in future? Either one.
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we have seen a lot of multi-site competitions, and I think it should be all about the versatility of a player. And when it comes to mapping in general, I think that we will also see like parts that some other mapper can do better than someone else, so that we can see like featuring someone. So, and we also have like more opportunities when it comes to that, so that we start with a full speed section. And with a full speed section, I don't know, I think the prime example for that, I always mention that in almost every podcast, is the French regionals.
Yeah, I think at least me and you, Scotty, once it was announced Trackmania Grand League, then we saw the first map pack. I think both of us were like, we went from Trackmania World Championship to this, because you had such a good feeling leaving that match in the grand final was so close. It was the best match of all time. Then coming into this, maybe players are new to this. Maybe the maps were over-exaggerated. I don't think the maps are like that at the moment. So it was kind of a harsh like switch. It was not like a faded switch. It was like from black to white. But now, the more I think about it, and I think I summed that up like maybe 2 months after, it was like, why just show one part of the community? Why just show one style? I mentioned that my favorite sport in real life is mixed martial arts, because then it's everything. I like that more than boxing, that is specialized in one thing. So now it feels like maybe the guy who is maybe the best to handle something in Trackmania is the best player. And that is good. But if you think that maybe, I don't know if you meant this with the question, but I think it's all up to Nadeo how they want to do this, because the impact they have is so big. They can essentially do whatever they want with the mapping style. If Gillies doesn't like what the community is sending in, then we know he will just build something by himself, or say that Softy builds something, or to Tona to build something. So if, let's say that if Kisla says to Nadeo that a mixed map should be like this, I don't think they necessarily will listen too much to that. They will say, okay, cool, but still just move on. So
they will ghost you.
It's all up to Nadeo how they want to aim this, because we've seen other tournaments just learning from that, because now they know that the best players are playing that tournament. So if I was a tournament organizer, and if I wanted, let's say, Pack to play, Carl Jr. to play, or anyone to play, I would try to aim that tournament to be equal to the Trackmania Grand League, because then the players would have some sort of training on that sort of type of map. So the power is in Nadeo's hands, and maybe the power is too strong at the moment. Maybe we need some sort of rivalry tournament to Nadeo. The closest thing we have is the Rater Cup, and that is really not a competitor, because we know that is more of a show. So it would maybe be nice to see another big tournament coming in that, I don't know, listen to the community better. I don't know if that's the wrong thing to say, because I don't necessarily think that Nadeo is too bad to listen to the community, but maybe some sort of community-made big tournament where we have the voice instead of doing what the voice says. I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I have an idea, and I'm trying to do that actually on stream, to like ask the people in the chat what they like can imagine what I could build. Like, for example, just go like, should I build an ice part now? Should I build a dirt part? And I want to implement
Carlo.
I want to implement the community a little bit more into mapping and everything, and what they like, what they dislike, to give myself instant feedback on the thing. Yeah, and I had also some things in my chat here. Some things. Should we pick them up now or later? I mean, just
1 point about the mapping that had just come into my head, because I think that was something I don't remember when I wanted to make that a valid point. I think it was it was one mapper that built a map for Trackmania Pro League. I think it was Bussy who released it then on stream, and then the map later was picked for Gaming Winterfest or Gaming Assembly. But then I brought up the point that I will eventually get to now. It's maybe the reason why mappers are not really well known in the scene is simply because if you want to build a map for a competition, that map should be secret until it's released. And I don't agree with that. I think it's totally fine if a mapper wants to showcase what he is doing. Maybe other can learn from it, and eventually then the community gets better maps in the end. So it's some
Good
sort
point.
of, I don't know when it started that, okay, everybody should have the same time to train it. Everybody should know when the map is out. It should be somewhat official, and that is why they keep it secret. But I would like to see if Nadeo eventually go for open map requests, that they allow people to show what they built, and then we don't really know if they're getting picked or not. So if you want to keep up with 100 different streams to see who built what, and then train the 100 maps and eventually get a little benefit from it, then fine. But I really want to see mappers actually getting showcased on streams as well. That it's fun to watch mappers build maps for randomly, but it will feel more fun if you know that, okay, now I want to actually see how Kaisla is doing once he wants to build a proper map, once he's potentially building a map that the winner of Trackmania Grand League can be decided on. So yeah, just something else that I want to add that should be tested out.
I want to add one thing, and this is like the first time when I built the map, I didn't even know how to put a custom camera. I had no idea about this. I mean, this sounds so pathetic, but also
I don't want to do it.
yeah, but also with mapping, I mean, there are some transitions or some hotkeys that you just don't know from the get-go. And I think by just like seeing a mapper mapping on stream, I think this is actually a thing where really people can go into mapping, and this is a good thing. So maybe it's a good point that you brought up there, Eirik. I just have to say that.
Thank you.
Coming from the map designer himself,
I know everything about. I have a master degree in mapping, so yeah.
A master's degree in mapping. Any chance given to you by yourself?
I don't know, but just to give a statement about. I mean, my statement. I have the best statement in the game. I mean, people that are eventually caring about mapping, they were like, "Yeah, I have a classic map on TMX. I have that, but not only that, I have the shortest map. So I'm good enough to build like a quality map that." You don't need to have like a lot of scenery. Just have 13 seconds, 2 good turns. If those turns are good enough, classic map instant. So if you want to check out my map, weekly short on 1 on TMX, good luck. I will pay you. I'm not too rich at the moment. I don't know, 20 euros if you beat it.
Wait, what map?
You have played it, weekly short on 1. It was one of the maps I went into every stream and spammed in 2015. So yeah, you have played it.
That was before I started then, so I might still have a chance.
Nobody has a chance. That map was hunted like, I don't know, too much.
Weekly shorthand 1.
Yeah.
Racetals Club.
Yep. Yeah, he's sick.
I see.
Yeah,
but let's move forward. Let's not talk about me. I mean, we can, but
I'll need to check out that myself. But one of the kind of last points I wanted to mention, I mean, I don't know if you guys have much else, but I mean, one of the last points I wanted to mention was just kind of piggybacking off of what I believe it was Eirik said, is Nadeo kind of deciding how the scene moves forward. And how do you guys feel about that in general? I mean, me personally, I've always kind of had trouble with the Nadeo map style. I don't find it interesting. I don't find it fun to play on. And especially that was one of the things I was talking about when we were talking about TMGL. And compared to the community-made maps, I find the Nadeo maps much more boring to play on. You know, much less entertaining to play on, much less engaging to my skills, or you know things like that. I don't like the Nadeo maps as much. And having them deciding how maps are moving, how the community moves forward maps-wise, kind of worries me in a sense. I mean, I'd like to then trust that they know they know what's best and that they're kind of moving forward with everyone in mind. But I mean, I don't. How do you guys, as I said, back to my original question, how do you guys feel about them just being the kind of judge, jury, and executioner of the direction of Trackmania's mapping?
I think it all comes down to, again, this is a point we brought up earlier, that the community gave them a lot of backlash. I think they agree with what my view was on, at least back once you went from such a good final in the tech, and then suddenly you want to take that away, start something brand new without giving up like a really proper reason about it. Why didn't you test out tech in the first place? Try to promote that as an official event. So I guess maybe it's all, if you have a problem with Nadeo, it's probably because of a bad start, and because I think they actually are getting better and better by listening to maybe the community more, maybe having now not only hillless maps, but actually showcasing some of the mappers. But they still have a way to go, at least in my eyes, to do it. But I don't know if they're too scared to let maybe the community have too much a big of an impact, if they think that the main idea that they had about identities are not going to be understand, or if the maps are not going to be as they wanted, or everything. But I mentioned this already in the first map pack about why should Gillies, who has created this game, why should he build maps when you have community members that has probably spent 10 years trying to build maps, trying to get better at building maps, that knows this, that is so passionate about it? Why not let the experts do what they want to do? Then you show the community that you care about that. And so, yeah, I think maybe they should be better at just letting go of stuff and trusting the community. But I'm going to say this again. We are good at pointing out what the bad part of some subjects are instead of making the overall view of it. And I think the Trackmania Grand League, even though maybe we could disagree with some parts, and then being maybe the mapping side, that the event itself is good. It's good that Nadeo cares. So I would rather have them just forcing through a map style instead of not being around anymore. So yeah, things could be better, but it could be way worse as well. So yeah.
Yeah, true. And I mean, a thing that is also very important is transparency. Maybe just ask the players what they think about it. I mean, it is as simple as that, but like it is like that. Maps are secret till that part, and then players can play it till 17. They are not uploaded. They are top secret in a, I don't know, somewhere in a bank or so. But I mean, they should communicate more with the players. And also, a thing that I had in my chat is here that new mappers know where to request maps. That I think there are like one or two, or maybe even more people outside who can build as good identities as Firestorm or someone like that. So why are you laughing, man? But I don't know, but smiling.
Yep.
And that's why I think that there should be more transparency in that part. Yeah.
I'd agree with you in that sense. I think transparency is important, and and just a kind of general sentiment. I think with Eirik saying as well, I think they are making progress, but there's still quite a way to go. That's just kind of my overall feeling to it. I'd like to kind of know what their end game is on that, but I mean, well, I guess there is a little bit of debate over the kind of mixed style that they're going in. I mean, me personally as a competitive player, I always preferred the way it was in the old SEL maps. And even the French regionals nowadays, where they are on mixed surfaces or mixed styles, but they're still technical maps that demand skill input, so to speak. So I mean that's kind of my feeling on it, and that's kind of at least all I kind of wanted to bring into today's subjects. Of my fellow friends, get any more points that you guys wanted to address with this week's matters?
Yeah, one point in the ending that was also my chat. Someone said that he likes actually spending time on mapping. I mean, I like spending time with casting as well, but like it is a bit unfair that like only the editors are getting money from that. I mean, it is how the things are. Mappers are always there, but I mean, in the end of the day, the world is unfair, and therefore we need to like as Eirik said already, also reward the maps or the mappers for the maps that they bring to the competition. Because the main thing, how we, the casters and the mappers, are paid is the recognition and also maybe the prestige that we are able to cast a tournament, or that the map is able to be in the map pool or anything like that, and not money or like anything else. So that was my last point.
For sure. Anything else from you, Eirik?
Not regarding this. I hope you guys have some questions. I don't think I have any questions in my chat, at least. Pretty dead chat today. I don't know. Boring people.
Yeah, I kind of at least tried to weave in the questions I had through. at least the points we were making, the points we were talking about. Anything else on your end, Turbo? Any questions?
I think I've picked everything up, yeah.
But I think we agreed on that in the sort of secret Discord group that we have that nobody's allowed to see in, that maybe we should ask people if what they prefer, because now for every episode I'm somewhat, besides the ZRT, because of course people are going to tune into the ZRT, that at least my viewers are somewhat slowly but surely dropping down. I don't know your channels, but if the community would like, if our community would like to actually have one place to watch it instead of now maybe having 3 places to watch it, if they prefer it now, because now you can easily, or maybe ask, let's say if you want to ask a question, now you have 3 people looking at a chat that is going really slow, and it's easy to pick up if you have a question, or if you want one place where you can interact with everybody that is watching this. So
Yeah.
if at least my 13 viewers, if someone of you wants to say, would you prefer to watch this
or
on
3
channel?
streams.
What?
1 or 3 streams.
Yeah, 1 or 3 streams. So if you want to watch this on one stream, and I guess that stream would probably be Scotty's, because he's the guy behind it. I saw someone suggesting that we should switch every week. At least I don't want to be like a guy who switches too much, because where should you watch it then? So yeah. I don't know. So at the moment nobody's replying in my chat. So any from yours?
Yeah,
dead viewers.
Well, I've got some responses for that, but I believe the most important thing to do with that question is kind of everything's broken with Eirik.
Oh.
But I think the most important thing for us to do on that is to put it out publicly. I suppose that's out publicly, but to put it out in things like Twitter, so people have a chance to have their input, and we can take everything into consideration. I mean, I know some of you guys are saying you would prefer the kind of one channel, one stream idea. I mean, it's certainly something we can take into account. I mean, I can't promise you guys that it's something that's going to change overnight. I mean, we certainly just need to kind of look at what works best and things like that. But I'm sure either one of us, I'll probably do it just after this. We'll put up something on Twitter, and you guys can let us know what you think about what we should change to, and if we should change at all.
Yeah, but I also thought in my head that maybe it's good to post on Twitter, but I'm just looking at the people who actually care about this. They are probably in chat now. If I post something on Twitter, I think at the moment, not to brag too much, but I think I have too many followers that are just gonna, I want to press a button, but I'm really never gonna care about it, because sure, I have a lot of followers now, but they are not gaining into views once I try to promote it. So if you want your voice to be heard, it's easier to say it now instead of voting it on Twitter, but I guess we probably will anyway, because at least my chat is, mozzarella pizza says one stream would be easier, so we go for one stream, right?
Yeah, well, not necessarily voting. I mean, that is just kind of, as you said, baseless clicking. More taking responses from people, and actually people who take the time to message and say, this is what I think.
Yeah, sure.
And so on and so forth. Because, I mean, we can take what we've got now, but I mean, as I said, it's a kind of hard question to answer at the ass end of a 1.5 hour long podcast. But yeah, maybe something we can bring up in the following weeks as well, or whatever sort of timescale we put ourselves in. But definitely something we can look into if you guys are looking for some changes, and so that we can see about making sure you guys have the best viewing experience possible. But that's it from me, guys. Any following words from either of you two?
Suggest topics for the chat. If they want to interact with us, I think it's pretty easy to interact with us. If you just want to suggest a topic, I guess we will talk about that topic. So if you want to have feedback about something we should change about the length, any feedback at the moment, if you give feedback, you're probably going to be 100% off that feedback, so we'll probably listen to you. So if you have any feedback about, is it too long, too short, too many topics, too few topics, too bad topics, too good topics, hit us up. And I would like to see more interaction from the people that is watching this, because we appreciate you, we like you, and at least I do. I don't know about you guys, but I'm community person of the year, right?
Yeah, only because it was on your own award show. But I mean, I can really speak for myself in saying that we appreciate everyone that comes along.
I'm not coming next Tuesday.
Well, you were nearly not fucking coming this Tuesday either, Mr. fucking
Fashionable late.
Are we Brennan Cow Jr. on the Razor Cup?
But yeah, I mean, of course, we all appreciate you guys. We'll take into account anything you guys have to say. So definitely get in touch with us through whatever means, be it on the next podcast, be it through Discord, through Twitter, or anything like that. If you guys want to see us bringing up anything, or if you want to see us changing anything. But I think, to be honest, that's it for us three before we end up at each other's throats. It has been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, once again. This has been episode 9, I believe, of Let's Talk Trackmania. We will be back next week. We will be back right here once again. You can check the socials link just below for if you want to follow any one of us on our various social media streams. But thank you, everyone, for joining. It has been a pleasure. It has been me, Mr. Scotty. We have Mr. Holdal, EirikHoldal, and we have Mr. Ludwig. We have Turbo as well. And we will all see you next week, and we will see you later. Good night.